Oh wow, look at that. Hey, welcome back to my channel. I make weekly art tutorials, paint-alongs and vlogs, and in this video I'm going to be doing a review of the VivivaColors. This is part 2 of the video series. In part 1 I actually unboxed the whole VivivaColors Inktober set, which basically came with the colour sheets with some postcards and some aqua pens. So you should check out that video if you want to know everything that comes in the set. But in this video I want to specifically focus on the colour sheets by doing swatches and also doing a painting for Paintscape. They are essentially watercolours that have been saturated onto sheets, hence the name colour sheets. The cost for the colour sheets range from £16 to £34 each, but there are a number of different collections and different paint sheets that you can actually get on the website. This set in particular, which is the Inktober edition, comes in 16 colours, which includes 4 pastel colours and kind of like 4 autumny colours. Like it has that kind of autumn feel to it because Inktober takes place in October. In terms of Paintscape, this is a challenge that's being done on MaksPaper, which I'll link down below, and it essentially involves doing a do this in your style landscape challenge where 15 prompts with 15 pictures of beautiful landscapes from Africa are drawn in a 30-day period. So I'm going to be starting that challenge, and in doing so I will also be reviewing the colour sheets. The paints actually come in what almost looks like a small cardboard notebook, which means it's incredibly light and portable, definitely unique, but also I don't think it's waterproof at all. I think if this were to get wet, it would be just over.
It's all over. Don't cry, don't beg. It's all over.
There are 16 squares at the bottom of each sheet, almost like a tab, so that you can use them to find the colours that you want to use. But you do have to flick back and forth between the booklets to get access to the sheets and to the individual colours that you want. There are some waterproof sheets inside to stop the colours mixing unintentionally. The back has an area that can be used as a palette, and it also has a fold out bit so that you can use it as a palette regardless of what sheet you're on. I'll discuss the pros and cons as I swatch, but rather than just doing normal swatches, I'm going to be doing loose watercolour florals in each individual colour so that we can see how the paint works. Does it spread nicely across the page? Is it easy to blend? What is it like when we do wet on wet technique? I will also do a painting at the end. So my initial impression was actually that I'm quite impressed with the vibrancy of the colours. I wasn't sure how vibrant they would be or how close to the swatch cards at the bottom they would be, given that the actual sheet themselves looked so different to the colour that I would expect. But it was really nice, it was really vibrant, and I don't know if you can see that I'm just adding the tiniest bit of water to the sheet and I'm getting so much colour, in fact more colour than I anticipated initially. So a little really does seem to go a long way. Despite that, the cheapskate in me tried to use as much paint as possible, so I kept trying to reuse that small tiny spot. It does eventually run out, so it's not infinite, but it definitely did go further than I thought it would. And then there's the fire color. So being the fire color had a love-hate relationship. I mean, it's almost like gold, like it's such a nice color in itself. Fire is beautiful. The only con of fire is that when you paint with it, you can't really paint over it, so you can't really layer it. I think it's because it's a bit metallic and it's shiny and shimmery, which I loved initially. But then I did find that when I was painting with it, and perhaps it's because I haven't used metallic paint enough, but when I was painting with it, I couldn't really, it didn't really blend well with anything else, and I couldn't really layer on top of it. It was almost like it would repel other paint. It's a nice color, but yeah, we had some difficulties. The happy yellow, which I was kind of worried about because it has green specks on the sheet, so I thought, well, it was going to be a green, and the only true yellow there is actually completely yellow, not a speck of green in it when you paint with it. The only thing that I would change about the perhaps color selection is, one, I would probably it would have been nice to have a purple, just personal preference, and then two, I did not like the browns. Like I really did not like the browns. Brown, for some reason, when I painted with it, would have this like green rim around it after, so it's kind of like it's not metallic, but it would basically, it's almost like the pigments would start separating, so that I didn't like. And the earth brown, I just didn't like the shade. So the browns I didn't like. If I wanted the browns, I just had to mix them myself using the other colours basically. Apart from those two browns, I think the colour selection was excellent. This peacock blue is insane. I don't understand it. I don't know how it looks purple, but is an actually incredibly bright blue. Absolutely beautiful. It almost reminds me of the Kuretake set. Like, that's the kind of vibrancy that it has as well. In terms of the main pros, one of the things that I love is just the general company itself. So the fact that it's sustainable, the fact that it's supporting local communities in India because it's handmade by women in the community, I think is just wonderful. And although it's not what I don't think it's a small company given how, you know, large and wide scale everything is, it's still got that like small company feel in terms of the fact that the co-founder is very involved, is very approachable. I love the fact that this was started as a family business and that it was inspired by his grandmother. This paper is completely biodegradable. So in terms of doing the right things for humanity, so in terms of like doing the right thing, like the company is. So from that perspective, that's a good pro. As you can see, the majority of the set has warm colours, which means reds, oranges, browns, orangey yellows. I could get a really nice gradient with the pastel colours, but with the others I found that I got quite a few harsh lines even if I was doing wet on wet technique. The final colour is the pastel blue, which does really resemble the peacock blue. It's just maybe slightly lighter. Let's discuss some more aspects of these paints. The portability, like it is so easy to carry around, and I can't believe that with this I basically have access to 16 colors, and they have a lot more colors and even bigger range, so I can only but imagine the amount of colors that I could / will probably get. The majority of the colors are absolutely beautiful and I can't fault at all. The double-edged sword of the fact that it is prioritizing the fact that it's portable. The case, you may not like it. I mean, on one hand it's paper and it's recyclable, on the other it's not waterproof. And then also they recommend that you wait for each sheet to dry before you close it, but in theory that would mean that when painting you would either have to hold everything like a jar like this, which would not make sense, or you'll just have to wait for it to dry, or do what I did, which is ignore that instruction and close it anyway so that you can use the colors that you want. Another potential con is just the like flipping back and forth when you're trying to paint. There's just something nice about having a palette, having all the colors out there and just picking what you want. Whereas with this, you will inevitably, unless you're having a very limited color palette of the same type of colors, you will have to flip back and forth to get the colors that you want. You can kind of see what colors you have and you can find them quickly, but it's just, for me, not the same as actually having the colors in front of me and just reaching out and getting them. And then things that aren't necessarily cons but are unknowns is I don't know about the light fastness. I don't know if technically they're professional grade, and I also can't really quantify how much paint there is. I don't know whether they will last for 10 paintings or whether they will last for 100, and on the site it says that it's quite comparable, that it's more than a pan or around the amount of a pan, and it's quite long lasting. I have no way of knowing that, and perhaps once I do finish a colour I will let you know. I assume that once it's wet, so for example like that, then I can't use that bit anymore, it's not as saturated. I don't know, but that's again an unknown. And these are the 16 colours available, all swatched out and their names, so just pause it if you want to have another look. But now we'll go through a quick painting that I did for Paintscape, and I say quick only because I sped it up, not because it was quick for me to do. I think it's a nice way to like at least acknowledge the fact that it's Black History Month. It's just also showing beautiful landscapes and beautiful places in Africa that perhaps wouldn't otherwise be as widely publicized. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing that. I'll leave the link to the Instagram down below. So the first prompt on the Paintscape challenge is actually Nigeria. These are the Ogbunike caves in Anambra State. So I tend to do landscapes differently every single time. My aim with this one was to initially just do like a bit of wet on wet, so the walls on either side were wet on wet, just to see how the paint blends together. And then the aim was to do just block colors and then gradually build up and gradually layer. And as you may be able to tell later on, the rocks right at the front, at the bottom of the page, basically I can only make them darker, but I couldn't blend them, and that's what I was referring to when I was talking about the color fire. I could add it on top, but if when I used it at the bottom, I couldn't really add anything else on top of that. I did end up using the browns, and my only way of really combating that, just adding quite a lot of dark blue to just try and make it as dark as possible and try and cover like that green effect. When I started adding on the extra layers to add more details, I found a couple of difficulties. The main thing was that it'd take longer than I would expect for the paint to dry. So sometimes, although it'd feel dry to touch and I would have felt like a decent amount of time has passed, I tried to paint on top and the paint would start to kind of feather out, not necessarily blend. So it's not as if, you know, the red and the yellow will form orange. It's more that I could see the red seeping into the yellow area. The other thing was that sometimes I think the paint itself is quite staining. So sometimes with other watercolor brands, if you lay down a color, the paper is still wet and you dab it or you use a wet brush, you can kind of remove that and use that to kind of fix mistakes or to make things look a bit more faded. But with this, no matter how much I tried to correct certain mistakes or how many times I tried to wet something or to dab or use tissue or use a brush, as I'm doing here, it just doesn't get much lighter. Like, you just can't lift it. So basically it's staining. But this is the final result, and I find it amazing that a small booklet could allow me to create such a painting. To answer the question, is it worth it? I think so. I definitely think so. In summary, the set is portable and very travel friendly, but it doesn't have a case, it's not waterproof, you have to flip back and forth, and you also have to wait for the paint to dry between sheets, and it's hard to tell how much paint is left. In terms of the paint itself, the colours are beautiful, wet on wet works nicely, it's a nice warm set and the colours transparent, but the browns weren't that nice. It doesn't lift, so it's quite staining. It's tricky to layer or glaze over with paint. The drying time I think is quite long, which is why the wet on dry was feathering, and it's not light fast. In terms of the general pros, it's affordable, so a set of 16 paints can be as cheap as £16, so that's £1 per colour. It's sustainable, handmade, and the company is quite good. So for all those reasons, I would rate the packaging 2 out of 5, the portability a 4.5 out of 5, the price a 3 out of 5, the paint quality a 3 out of 5, the vibrancy a 3.5 out of 5, and finally the colour range a 3.5 out of 5. So I really did like this set, and I think I will get some more in the future, especially because I want to travel more and I want to do more art as I'm travelling. If you're new to watercolour, I'd probably recommend that you start with a pan set like a Winsor & Newton Cotman set, but if you have that and you've experimented and you're going to be traveling and you want to try something different, then this is definitely for you. Thank you so much for making it this far into the video. I really appreciate you. You're a real MVP. Let me know that you made it this far by telling me if you could only pick 3 colours from this palette. So if you had to do a limited palette, which 3 colours would you pick? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye. My gosh. Excuse me.